Leave my mom alone.
Stop her from the channel. Stay away from this little girl.
Help! Please spare. She's just a child.
The last time I saw Una Park's face, she was standing in the rain outside the Kang estate with 2 suitcases and mascara running down her cheeks like war paint. But that's not the part that haunts me. The part that haunts me, the part that wakes me up at 2 a.m. with my heart slamming against my ribs, is what happened 3 weeks later, when her father's men came for my daughter. When I heard Zuri screaming my name from inside a black SUV with tinted windows. When I ran into the street barefoot in a nightgown and threw myself onto the hood of that car like my body could stop 2 tons of steel. But I'm skipping ahead, because this story doesn't start with the kidnapping. It starts 3 months earlier with a desperate woman taking a job she didn't understand in a house she should have run from. And it builds slowly, then all at once, to a slap. And before the slap, a scream. And before the scream, 3 words that my 5-year-old daughter hurled at the most dangerous woman in Seoul like grenades. Don't touch my mom. And the man who heard those words, the man the whole city called the ghost, looked up from his phone and for the first time in 3 months saw me. If you're new here, welcome to AIMZY Mafia. If you've been here before, welcome back. Hit that like button, subscribe, and turn on notifications. Trust me, you don't want to miss what happens next. My name is Amara Jenkins. I was 31 years old when this started. Black, American, and completely, impossibly alone in Seoul, South Korea. I'd followed a man there, Derek Williams, fine as sin and twice as destructive. He'd landed a corporate transfer to Samsung's headquarters and painted this picture of us building a life together in Asia. New city, new start, new everything. I believed him because I needed to believe in something. My mother was sick. I was drowning in debt from her medical bills, and Derek's voice in my ear saying, "Trust me," was the only life raft in sight. So I left Atlanta, left my mother's bedside, left everything. 6 months later, Derek drained our joint account, moved in with his Korean language tutor, a 23-year-old named Hyun, and vanished. Left me with an expired tourist visa, a 5-year-old daughter, and $400. He'd hidden my passport in his gym bag. I found it 2 weeks after my mother died. Stage 4 breast cancer. I missed the funeral. I missed holding her hand. I missed everything because a man I trusted had stolen the one document that could have gotten me home. By the time I replaced the passport, there was nothing to go home to. Mama's house went to medical debt collectors. My sister Keisha was living with her boyfriend in a 1-bedroom in Detroit. She offered to let us sleep on the couch, but she sounded relieved when I said no. And I had Zuri, my baby girl, my whole heart walking around outside my body, and she needed to eat. I did what undocumented people do. I survived. Washed dishes at an expat barbecue joint in Itaewon for cash. Cleaned a nail salon in Gangnam after hours. Did laundry at a dry cleaner whose owner paid me half what he paid everyone else and expected gratitude. Some weeks I ate once a day so Zuri could eat 3 times. Then Mrs. Cho walked in. 62 years old, 5 feet tall, head housekeeper for the Kang estate in Hanam-dong. She watched me press shirts for 20 minutes without saying a word. Then she adjusted her glasses and said in careful English, "You work hard. You don't complain. I need someone like that." Triple my current pay. A room in the staff quarters, tiny but clean. A bed for me, a mattress for Zuri, meals included. I said yes before she finished the sentence. What nobody told me was whose floors I'd be scrubbing. Kang Seongjin, 36, CEO of Kang Industries, construction, shipping, real estate. That was the public version. The real version was that the Kang family had run organized crime in Seoul for 3 generations. Drugs, gambling, protection, weapons trafficking. Seongjin had taken over at 28 after his father's stroke and expanded the empire into territories his father never touched. The staff whispered about him over cold rice in the kitchen like they were discussing the weather and a tornado at the same time. He was quiet, controlled, never raised his voice. His eyes did the work, dark, steady, flat as bullet casings. The guard said he'd killed a man at 19. The kitchen staff said he'd ordered his own uncle's execution for skimming profits. Whether any of it was true, I couldn't say. What I could say was that in 3 months of working in his house, I never saw him smile. Not once. The man moved through rooms like a cold front, and people got out of his way the same way you'd move for weather. But Seongjin wasn't my problem. Yuna Park was. Yuna was his fiancée, 29, daughter of Park Yi-hyun, who ran the second-largest crime syndicate in the capital. The engagement wasn't love, it was a treaty. Two families, decades of bloody territory disputes, brokering peace the old-fashioned way. Marriage. Yuna was beautiful the way a blade is beautiful. Perfect skin, perfect nails, hair like black silk. She moved through that house like she'd already redecorated it in her mind, and every person in it was furniture she hadn't decided to keep. She hated me on sight, not disliked. Hated. The kind of hate that takes inventory, that watches you from across a room and calculates where you're weakest. The first time was the hallway. I was mopping the second floor. She walked straight through the wet section in her Laobaotins, stumbled, and turned on me with eyes like flat stones. Are you stupid or just blind? I'm sorry, ma'am. I put the sign. Clean it again, the entire hallway. When you're done, clean it again. I cleaned it 4 times. My knees were purple for a week. After that, it escalated daily. She invented reasons to punish me. Silverware wasn't polished enough, redo it. Guest bathroom smelled wrong, scrub it again. Her closet wasn't sorted by season and color, fix it. Don't leave until it's perfect. Once she made me re-iron 37 blouses because she spotted a crease in one. When I finished, she pulled one off the hanger, dropped it on the floor, and stepped on it with her heel. Missed one, she said and walked out. She brought friends over one afternoon. Socialites, daughters of money. They came down the main staircase where I was polishing the banister, and Yuna stopped 3 steps above me. This is the one I told you about, the American. One friend wrinkled her nose. Does she even speak Korean? Barely, but what can you expect? They brushed past me. One bumped my shoulder, deliberate, and didn't apologize. I heard them laughing all the way down the hall. I cried that night. Bathroom floor, water running, towel pressed to my face so Zuri wouldn't hear. Then I washed my face and went to bed. Because that's what mothers do. The worst was the tea incident. Yuna had wives of business associates over for lunch. She insisted I serve specifically me. I knew why. I was the performance. Her trained pet. Look at my obedient foreigner, watch her bow and scrape. I served flawlessly. But when refilling her cup, exhaustion made my hand shake. 1 drop of tea hit the white tablecloth. 1 drop. Yuna picked up the entire teapot and poured it across the linen. Slowly, deliberately, tea flooding everywhere, dripping onto the floor. Her guests gasped. Now clean it up and bring a fresh setting. This one is ruined. I cleaned it on my hands and knees while those women watched. While Yuna smiled above me like a queen. While I promised myself, swore to God and my dead mother that this was worth it. Because Zuri was safe. Zuri was fed. That was enough. Then Thursday happened. Zuri had found a stray cat. Orange tabby, skinny, torn ear. She smuggled it into the main kitchen wrapped in her jacket. I gave it a saucer of milk and told her 5 minutes. I should have taken it back outside right then. I replay that moment a lot. That's when Yuna walked in. White Valentino dress, full makeup, headed to some charity event. The cat panicked, leapt from Zuri's arms, scrambled across the island, launched itself at Yuna. Claws caught the silk, tore a 6-inch gash before Zuri grabbed it back. The silence lasted 3 seconds, felt like 3 years. Your animal, Yuna whispered, ruined my dress. Ma'am, I'm so sorry. The slap came from nowhere. Her hand connected with my face so hard my vision whited out. I caught myself on the counter, tasting blood, copper, and humiliation. Sorry doesn't fix a $12,000 dress. She grabbed the water glass and hurled it at me. Glass shattered at my feet. Water soaked my uniform. I didn't move, didn't speak, kept my eyes on the floor. Survival mode. The same mode I'd been in for 2 years straight. And you. She turned to Zuri, raised her hand. My body went cold. Something deeper than fear. Primal, I stepped forward. But Zuri got there first. My 5-year-old daughter, 4 feet tall, second-hand dress with a patch on the sleeve, ran in front of me and planted herself between me and Una Park. She was shaking so hard I could see it from behind, her whole body vibrating like a tuning fork. She balled her tiny fists and screamed. "Don't touch him, why, Mom?" That's what I remember clearest. Not the words so much as the sound. This raw, animal scream that was too big for her body. It echoed off the marble and the steel and the tile, and it went everywhere, kitchen to hallway to the living room where, I learned later, Kang Seongjin was sitting with 2 of his lieutenants. Una froze. "What did you just say to me?" And Zuri, God, my baby, she was crying now, snot running down her face, voice wobbling like it was about to shatter, but she didn't move. She stood right there. Don't hit my mama. She didn't do anything. It was my cat, and you can't just hit people." It wasn't eloquent. It wasn't a speech. She was hiccuping and repeating herself, and she couldn't get the words out straight. But she didn't move. That's the part. She was terrified, and she didn't move. The kitchen stopped breathing. Guards at the service entrance stood slack-jawed. Mrs. Cho had her hand over her heart. Yuna's face twisted. She grabbed Zuri's arm, hard. My daughter yelped this sharp, hurt sound that I still hear in my sleep sometimes. "Let go of my daughter." My voice didn't sound like mine. Low, steady, a voice that had stopped caring about consequences. "Or what? You'll call the police. You don't even have a visa." "That's enough." Quiet from the doorway, the kind of quiet that silences everything else. Kang Seongjin stood there, jacket off. Sleeves rolled to his forearms, tattoos fully visible, serpents and chrysanthemums running up both arms, across the backs of his hands, crawling up his neck. His face was completely blank. Not angry, just empty, which was worse. His eyes moved from Una to Zuri to me, and then back to Una. "Let go of the child." That's all he said. 4 words, but Una dropped Zuri's arm like it burned her. Zuri ran to me. I crushed her against my chest. He didn't yell, didn't raise his voice. He looked at Una for a long time. I'm talking maybe 10 seconds, which doesn't sound like much, but try counting to 10 in a dead silent room. And then he said, "Come with me." He walked out. Una followed. Her heels clicked down the hallway toward his study. The door closed. I don't know everything that was said behind that door, but I know what happened next. About 40 minutes later, Una came out. Her face was white. Her eyes were red. She walked straight upstairs, and within the hour, 2 of the house staff were carrying her suitcases to a car in the driveway. She stopped in the foyer on her way out, looked at me across the room. I was sitting on a bench with Zuri asleep in my lap, an ice pack pressed to my cheek. Una stared at me with an expression I couldn't read. Hate, maybe, or something more complicated. Then she left. Later, days later, Mrs. Cho told me what Seongjin had said to Una behind that closed door. That the engagement was over. That she'd violated the code of his house. That a car would take her to her father's estate. When Una had pushed back, and apparently she pushed back hard, screaming about the alliance, about what her father would do, Seongjin had said something that Mrs. Cho heard through the wall. She said she couldn't make out most of it, but the last part was clear because his voice went very quiet, which was when he was at his most dangerous. Something about how the alliance assumed she'd bring honor to his house, and that what he'd witnessed was the opposite of honor. That was it. 20 years of territorial negotiations, billions of won in shared business, a peace treaty between 2 families, and he ended it. Not in a dramatic scene in the kitchen. Quietly, behind a closed door, the way real power works. Now, here's the thing, and I need to be honest about this because I've told this story a few times now, and I always want to be careful about how I tell it. The house didn't suddenly become this warm, welcoming place overnight. That's not how it works. Not in that world. For the first week after Una left, most of the staff avoided me entirely. They were scared. If Seongjin could break an alliance over a maid, what else would he do? Nobody wanted to be noticed. Nobody wanted to pick a side. The hallways felt emptier than when Una was in them. Mrs. Cho was the exception. She brought me dinner that first night, good food, from the main kitchen, and told me my position was secure. She said it matter-of-factly, like she was reporting the weather. but her hand shook when she set the tray down. Seongjin himself didn't say much. He told Mrs. Cho to make sure I got medical attention for my face and to give Zuri whatever she wanted to eat. Then he went back to his study and closed the door. Over the next 2 weeks, things thawed slowly. Not because of any grand gesture. Because of Zuri, she didn't know she was supposed to be afraid. She talked to everyone. She found the kitchen cook, a quiet woman named Sunhee, and asked her what she was making. She asked Tiho, the young guard, if he wanted to play. She waved at the gardener every morning until he started waving back. By the second week, Sunhee was leaving snacks outside our door. Tiho was slipping Zuri chocolate. The gardener still just grunted, but it was a warmer grunt. Seongjin made quiet adjustments. School supplies appeared in our room, good ones, an art set, a tablet with educational apps, children's books in Korean and English, no note, no fanfare. When I tried to thank him, he didn't look up from his papers. A child her age should be in school. Mrs. Cho is looking into options. Sir, I can't afford. Did I ask you to pay? And that was the end of that conversation. He wasn't warm about it. He was efficient, like it was a problem that needed solving. But I caught him once, just once, watching Zuri through his study window while she played in the courtyard. He didn't know I could see him from the hallway. His expression was, I don't even know how to describe it, like watching something he'd forgotten existed. The firefly nights started by accident. Zuri was catching them in the garden with a mason jar when Seongjin came through on his evening walk. Anyone else would have gotten out of his way. Zuri ran straight at him and shoved the jar against his chest. Mr. Kang, look, do you want to catch some? I was watching from the second-floor window. I pressed my hand against the glass and held my breath. He looked down at her. Then he took the jar and said, "Show me." I watched them for 40 minutes. This man who commanded armies, crouching in the grass, trying to catch fireflies with his tattooed hands while a 5-year-old bossed him around. He didn't catch a single one. Zuri caught 3 and showed him how, cupping her hands gently, waiting for the blink. He studied the jar like it contained state secrets. When they came inside, she was riding piggyback, arms around his neck, giggling so hard she could barely breathe. Our eyes met on the staircase, and I don't know how to describe what that felt like. I'd spent 2 years being invisible, being the help, being the woman people looked through, and this man looked at me like I was the only thing in the room. He set Zuri down. She ran off to show Mrs. Cho the jar. We stood there, me on the stairs, him at the bottom, and neither of us said anything for a while, which tells you everything, really. The silence said more than any words could have. Finally, I said, "Thank you for spending time with her. She's never had a father." The word just sat there between us. "Neither have I," he said quietly. "Not one worth having." He walked away, and I stood on that staircase and realized I was in very, very deep trouble. Then, about 3 weeks after Yuna left, the Park family responded. I'd started to let my guard down. That was the mistake. The house felt safer. Zuri was happier. And I'd almost let myself believe that the worst was over. I was in the staff courtyard early that morning before my shift, still in my nightgown, hanging the previous night's laundry. The courtyard was behind the kitchen, outside the main security perimeter. The compound had cameras and patrols covering the front gates and the residence, but the staff area backed onto a service road where delivery trucks came in. It was the one blind spot. Lower walls, fewer guards. I didn't know that at the time. Seongjin's head of security was fired for it afterward. Zuri was playing near the courtyard gate. I heard the car before I saw it, a black SUV pulling up fast on the service road. 2 men in dark suits. One grabbed Zuri before she could even react. Then she screamed, "Mama." I still can't talk about this part without my hands shaking. It's been 3 years and my hands still shake. The man was carrying my daughter toward the open car door. She was kicking, thrashing, biting at his hand. She bit him so hard he cursed in Korean. The second man stepped in front of me. "Message from Mr. Park. The engagement will be reinstated, or the girl doesn't come home." I don't remember deciding to fight him. I just remember my shoulder hitting his chest. I remember my nightgown tearing on the hood of the SUV. I remember my fingers clawing at the windshield while the engine revved. I remember thinking, not thinking, knowing, that if that car moved with my daughter in it, I would never see her again. The guards came, Seongjin's men pouring out of the compound, guns drawn. The SUV stopped. Tiho, the young guard, the one who gave Zuri chocolate, had his weapon pressed against the driver's window, and his hand wasn't shaking at all. They pulled Zuri out. She was hyperventilating. Her body was rigid, locked up. I grabbed her and collapsed right there on the pavement, and I rocked her and I said things. I don't remember what I said. Mama's here. You're okay. I'm sorry. Something like that. Over and over. My hands were shaking so badly I could barely hold on. Seongjin was across the city. A meeting in Gangnam. Mrs. Cho told me later that when the call came in, he put his fist through the car's dashboard, the navigation screen, cracked it in half, and his driver ran 3 red lights getting him home. He made it in under 20 minutes, which in Seoul traffic is basically impossible. He found us on the pavement, and he didn't say anything at first. He just crouched down. His tattooed hands hovered over Zuri's head like he wanted to touch her but was afraid he'd break her. Zuri, his voice was barely holding together. Are you hurt? She looked up at him, face soaked, snot everywhere. Scary men tried to take me. I watched something cross his face that I'd never seen before and hoped to never see again. It wasn't anger. Anger would have been human. This was something colder, something calculated. The guard standing nearby actually stepped back. He stood, turned to his head of security, spoke in Korean, quiet, rapid. I didn't understand most of it, but I understood enough to know that what he was saying wasn't a conversation. It was a list of instructions that someone was going to follow or die. Then he turned to me. His voice shifted by maybe 1 degree. You're being moved, tonight, both of you, into the main residence. Mr. Kang. This isn't a request, Amara. That was the first time he used my name. It hit me like being touched. He moved us into the east wing, 3 rooms, real furniture, sunlight, a guard outside our door at all times. Zuri picked a comforter with butterflies on it and hugged it for 10 minutes. She got her first real bed. She also got nightmares. And Seongjin pulled away. I felt it 3 days later. I was bringing fresh towels upstairs. He was coming the other direction. Our eyes met and something flashed across his face. I think it was want, but it could have been pain. They looked the same on him, and then he looked away. Stepped to the side. Pressed himself against the wall like my body was electric. Didn't speak. I heard his footsteps moving faster after I passed. After that, he rerouted himself around us. Ate in his study. Took his walks earlier so he wouldn't cross paths with Zuri in the garden. When they did run into each other, his voice was polite and hollow. Professional. The voice he used for contractors. Not the voice that had said, "Show me," while crouching in the grass. I learned later, much later, that he'd had his lawyers try to fix my immigration status within 48 hours of the kidnapping. Work visa. Sponsored by one of his legitimate companies. But the application got blocked. Someone in the immigration bureau, someone who owed the Park family, flagged it and buried it. Every legal route Seongjin's team tried, Park had already sealed shut. They were boxing us in. And Seongjin knew that if anyone figured out how much we meant to him, they'd have permanent leverage. So he shut down, built a wall, disappeared behind it. Mrs. Cho explained it to me in the laundry room one afternoon. He's protecting you by staying away. Protecting me from what? From what happens to the people he cares about. She looked at me over her glasses. His mother died when he was 14. Cancer is what the record says, but she'd been kidnapped twice before the diagnosis. Threatened more times than anyone counted. The stress is what killed her, and he decided then that he'd never let anyone get that close again. She paused. He hasn't, not in 22 years, not until your daughter screamed at a woman twice her size and didn't run. That kept me up at night. I'd lie in bed listening to Zuri's nightmares through the wall. She had them every night, around 2 a.m., waking up screaming, clawing at invisible hands. And I'd think about a 14-year-old boy burying his mother and building walls that nobody had touched in 22 years. And how my 5-year-old daughter had put a crack in them without even trying. Zuri left a jar of fireflies outside his study door one evening. She'd had Mrs. Cho write a note for her because her Korean letters were still shaky. "I caught these for you. You can let them go when you're not sad anymore." The jar was empty the next morning. The note was gone, and at breakfast I could have sworn his eyes were red, but he wouldn't look at me long enough to be sure. Then the nightmare happened, the bad one. 3 weeks after the kidnapping, Zuri vomited, couldn't stop shaking. I was on the floor cleaning her up, both of us crying, and I looked up and he was standing in the doorway, still dressed, tie loosened. He must have heard her screaming. I don't know how long he'd been there. "Can I?" His voice broke. He started again. "Is there something I can?" He couldn't even finish the sentence. Zuri looked at him. She reached out her arms. Didn't say a word. Just reached for him the way kids reach for someone safe. And he crossed the room and sat on her bed, and she crawled into his lap and pressed her face into his shirt, and his arms went around her like the walls of the compound. Like if he held her tight enough, nothing could get through. He looked at me over her head. His eyes were wet. He didn't try to hide it. "I'll stay until she falls asleep." He stayed until morning. I found them at dawn, Zuri curled against his chest, his back against her headboard, one hand still on her hair. He hadn't slept, hadn't moved, just sat there all night guarding a child from nightmares he couldn't fight the way he fought everything else. After that night, the wall crumbled, not dramatically, not all at once, but he started joining us for dinner again, started walking the garden when Zuri was outside, started looking at me with something in his eyes that made it hard to swallow. The war with the Park family kept escalating in the background. I didn't understand most of it. It was all in Korean, all behind closed doors, all phone calls and meetings that went past midnight. But I could read the tension in the house. Guards doubling their shifts. Mrs. Cho checking the locks 3 times instead of once. One night I was walking past Seongjin's study and heard him on the phone. His voice was so cold it didn't sound human. "Touch the child again, and I'll burn your house to the foundation with your family inside. That's not a threat, Park. That's a schedule." I stood in that hallway, and I should have been terrified. I wasn't, and that's the part that scared me. I went to the bathroom and looked at my reflection, and the woman looking back was not the woman who left Atlanta. That woman flinched at raised voices. This woman had thrown herself onto the hood of a moving car. This woman had just heard a man threaten murder and felt grateful. I thought, who are you becoming? And then I thought, someone who survives, and I went to bed. 2 weeks later, Park made his final move. Not against Seongjin, against me. Immigration officers. 7 in the morning, 3 of them with paperwork detailing every illegal thing about my existence in South Korea. Park had called in a government favor. Legal, clean, untraceable. They were going to deport us. Mrs. Cho woke me. Her hands were shaking. "Get dressed, don't bring anything." We ran. Through the service corridors, past Sunhee at the stove. She was crying, silently, and she pressed a bag of kimbap into my hands as we rushed past. And I think about that a lot, through a service door I'd never noticed, into a car where Tiho was waiting with the engine running. 2 hours of driving, Seoul disappearing behind us, then suburbs. Then countryside, rice paddies stretching silver in the early light, mountains dark against the sky. The only sound was the engine and Zuri sniffling in my arms. We ended up at a farmhouse outside Cheongju. Stone walls, tin roof. It smelled like damp earth and old wood and someone else's life. A rooster crowing somewhere like the world hadn't just ended. Tiho sat by the door with his gun on the table. Zuri fell apart. Not the brave Zuri. Not the Zuri who screamed at Una Park. The real Zuri. The 5-year-old Zuri who was tired and scared and wanted to go home, except she didn't know where home was anymore. She cried for Machi, the cat, still back at the estate. She cried for her butterfly comforter. She threw the stuffed cat Seongjin had given her across the room and screamed that she hated Korea. When I tried to hold her, she hit me, small fists pounding my chest. Why can't we just be normal? Why do bad things always happen? I held her through it, caught her wrists when she swung, pulled her close even when she fought. I didn't have an answer. Why can't we be normal was a question I'd been asking for 31 years. She cried herself out, went limp, and then, in a voice so small it barely existed, "I want a byoji." I need you to understand, she had never called him that before. Not once. The whole time, the fireflies, the piggyback rides, the dinner table, it was always Mr. Kang. Always. I don't even know where she learned the word. Maybe Mrs. Cho. Maybe the other kids she'd heard at the market. But in that farmhouse, scared and exhausted and snot-covered, she didn't ask for Mr. Kang. She asked for her father. I held her and told her he was coming. I didn't know if it was true. It was true. He came that night, alone, no guards, just headlights cutting through the dark. Tiho's hand went to his gun until he confirmed the plates. Seongjin walked in and Zuri launched herself across the room. He caught her, held her, closed his eyes, and he stood there. In this stranger's kitchen, in the middle of nowhere, holding my daughter with his face buried in her braids. I watched his jaw work, the muscle jumping as he fought for control. His tattooed fingers looked enormous against her small back. He didn't let go for a long time. "It's handled," he finally said over her head. "The immigration order withdrawn." "How?" "You don't want to know." I looked at his hands. His knuckles were split open, fresh blood under the tattoos. "What did you do?" He put Zuri down, told her to go find Tiho and see if there were fireflies in the field. She ran off, already smiling, already bouncing back, because kids are like that. They're brutal and resilient in equal measure. When she was gone, the mask dropped. "Park went after your visa. He went after your daughter. He will not stop." A pause. "So I stopped him." "What does that mean?" "It means 3 of his top men decided they'd rather work with me than for him. I helped them make that transition." I waited. "Park is out, Amara. His own people removed him. I didn't touch him. He made a gesture, opening a door. "Yuna has been relocated to Osaka. She won't come back." I knew there was more. I knew it had cost something, because Seongjin's jaw was doing that thing it did when he was holding something back. But I also knew I didn't want details. Not then. Not yet. Some truths you let in slowly, like cold water. What I did say was, "That wasn't free. What did you give up?" He looked at me for a long moment. I think that's when he realized I'd been paying attention, that I wasn't the woman scrubbing his floors anymore. That somewhere in the past 3 months, I'd started listening to his late-night phone calls through walls and piecing things together. "Territory," he said. "Gangnam." I didn't know exactly what that meant in numbers, but I'd heard his lieutenants talk about Gangnam the way farmers talk about their best field. I knew it was big. Was it worth it? They threatened my daughter. No pause, no calculation. I'd have given all of it. My daughter, not your daughter, not the child. My. "Why?" My voice cracked. I couldn't help it. "Why all of this for us?" He stepped closer. He looked exhausted, like he'd aged 5 years in 5 weeks, like the weight of what he'd done was settling into his bones. "Because she called me a byoji." His voice broke, just cracked right down the middle. "Because she left fireflies outside my door and told me to let them go when I wasn't sad anymore. Because you look at me like I'm a person and not a weapon." He swallowed. "And because I spent my whole life building something I would burn to the ground tonight if it meant keeping you and that little girl safe." "Seongjin." "I tried to stay away. I tried to keep you out of this. But they came for her anyway, because they could see what I was pretending I didn't feel." He reached out, touched my face. His split knuckles were rough against my cheek. "I'm not a good man, Amara. I know. This will be dangerous, always. I know that too. I have money. I can set you up somewhere safe. New names, clean start. And I wish I could tell you I said something beautiful, something quotable. But what I actually said, standing in a stranger's kitchen at midnight with tears running down my face, was, "I am so tired of being safe. I have been safe and small and invisible my whole life, and look where it got me. On my knees, scrubbing that woman's floors, getting slapped in front of my daughter." I wiped my face with the back of my hand. "Zuri wasn't safe when she screamed at Yuna. She was brave. And I want to be brave. I want to be here. I didn't finish the sentence. He kissed me. In that farmhouse kitchen, with bloody hands and fireflies blinking outside and my daughter's laughter carrying across the field. He kissed me like I was the first real thing he'd touched in 20 years. We went home the next day, to the main residence, to his wing. It wasn't easy. I want to be clear about that. His lieutenants didn't like it. I heard the arguments through walls, how it was reckless, how it made him look weak, how the other families would smell blood. Seongjin listened to every objection and then said, in that flat voice he used when things weren't up for debate, "She stays. The child stays. Anybody with a problem can talk to me directly." Nobody did. The staff came around slowly. Zuri made it happen. She learned Sunhee's name and started helping in the kitchen after school, standing on a step stool, stirring jjigae. She memorized every guard's name. She drew pictures for Mrs. Cho's refrigerator. She taught Tiho rock, paper, scissors and beat him 17 times in a row. Within a month, that household wasn't just tolerating us. They were protecting us. Because Zuri did what I couldn't, she turned a fortress into a family. Seongjin started teaching her Baduk, the Korean board game. They'd sit cross-legged on the floor after dinner, and he'd explain strategies with the same intensity he used for business. She beat him once. He stared at the board for a full minute, then looked at her, genuinely stunned. He kept the board exactly as it was for 3 days, showed it to anyone who walked by. She'd been calling him a byoji since the farmhouse, but now she did it everywhere. Loudly, at breakfast, in the garden, running down the hallway screaming it. The first time she said it in front of Mrs. Cho, the old woman had to take her glasses off and clean them twice. One night on the balcony, Seongjin told me something that I carry with me everywhere. She said it in that farmhouse, and I keep thinking I'll get used to it, that it'll stop hitting me. His arm was around my shoulders, Seoul glittered below us. But every single time, it's like the first time. His voice went rough. My own men call me boss, sir, ghost. My father called me soldier. She calls me a byoji, and I don't know what I ever did to deserve that. She loves you. I don't deserve it. She doesn't care about deserve. She cares about who you are to her. He was quiet for a long time. Then, stay, both of you, not as staff, not as guests. Mine, my family. The word came out like it cost him something vital. Like he was handing me a part of himself he'd never shown anyone. I thought about Atlanta, Derek, my mother's funeral, Yuna's floors. Every time I'd made myself smaller so the world wouldn't crush me. And I looked at this man, dangerous, broken, terrifying, gentle, and I said yes. That was 3 years ago. We married in the garden, the same one where Zuri caught fireflies. Small ceremony. Mrs. Cho cried. Sunhee made the food. Tiho stood guard with tears on his face that he'll deny until the day he dies. Machi the cat slept through the vows on the altar like he'd been personally invited. Zuri was the flower girl. She wore a hanbok in white and pink and walked the aisle with such exaggerated seriousness that everyone laughed, including Seongjin, and that made everyone cry. She's 8 now, speaks Korean better than me, which she loves pointing out, top of her class, still catches fireflies. Her abioji built her a glass enclosure in the garden so she can watch them glow without trapping them. She asked him once why he built it, and he said, and I'm going to remember this forever, because beautiful things shouldn't be caged. They should be free and know they're loved enough to come back. Mrs. Cho told me later he was talking about us. The empire still runs, I'm not naive. The phone calls at 3 a.m., the blood on his knuckles. The rooms in this house I don't go into. The men who arrive and leave without smiling. I know what my husband is, I know what he does. But inside these walls, the same walls where Unipark made me scrub floors until my knees bled, I am loved. Fiercely, without apology, without condition. And it all started because a 5-year-old girl refused to be silent. Because she planted her feet on cold marble and screamed, "Don't touch my mom," at a woman who could have destroyed us both. Because courage doesn't care about size, or age, or odds. It just cares about love. Last week, Zuri asked me if I remembered the day everything changed. "Do you know what I was thinking?" she said, "when I yelled at that lady." "What baby?" She shrugged, like it was the simplest thing in the world. "That you always protect me, so it was my turn." I held her face in my hands. This girl who'd grown taller and louder and braver every year, who spoke 2 languages and played baduk and called a crime lord a bioji. And I kissed her forehead and told her the truth. Everything good that happened to us, Zuri, every single thing, it started with you. She grinned. I know, Mama.